What advice would you give to be really successful in the company in terms of building those relationships with people? Do you have any hacks or things that you do to really optimize that process?
I would say get really authentic. You'd be shocked how insecure 7 and 8 figure founders and even 9 figure founders and their leadership teams can be sometimes, because everybody's kind of at that success level and everyone's trying to be impressive and everyone's carrying extraordinary pedigree at that point, right? What do you do when you come in places like this to really crack that code, to really see what's underneath them? To me, your biggest success driver is going to be how authentically you can connect with people and how much of the code you can actually discover what really drives them, not what they just kind of front for everybody else.
Hi, and welcome to Influence Unlocked. I'm here with a very special guest, Olenka Cullinan, and I'm so honored to have you on our show today. Thanks for being here.
I'm so excited to be here, Sherry. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Well, this is exciting because you're very, very successful in business. You're a power mom. You've got a beautiful 15-year-old daughter. Tell us how you got your start and what led you to creating the success that you have today.
Well, thank you for kind words. I'm very excited. It's definitely been a journey. You know, I grew up, if you hear some accent, it's not from Texas.
I think I'd recognize that, right?
Yeah. I grew up in Eastern Europe and I had a very interesting upbringing because my mom ran a company for 37 years, started with 87 employees, grew to 317. And I remember actually falling asleep at the factory when I was a little girl. What she taught me, though, is obviously she erased some of that fear of running a business. But I think my biggest learning experience with her was that you can have the most beautiful aesthetics, storefront, branding, but if your operations are not on point, that's where your company is going to suffer. So when I stepped into running my own companies, I had an exit. This is my second business that I'm running now. I really quickly realized that it's your back end that's really going to drive the sales, the marketing, and all the pieces in the company that make you successful. So it's been a journey of 20 some years.
Wow. I mean, congratulations, right? They always say it takes 20 years to become an overnight success.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's deconstruct your success. And in building companies, always there are people involved, yes, right? On the sales side, one of the things they say is sales is not a numbers game. That's what I say. It's a people game, right? Because they want us to believe it's a numbers game. Same thing with building your company. If you're going to have successful operations, you've got people inside the company. Tell us a little bit about how you built relationships with people.
Yeah. And, it's probably why one of the major reasons for my success. I'm just naturally curious and I love people. I love meeting them, getting to know them, and genuinely understanding what drives people. I'm actually kind of psychology junkie. My minor was in psychology. I've taken probably most of the courses available in the US in terms of how brain works, because I'm just always fascinated. And to me, people, love to be understood and seen, right? And if we lead from that position and really get to see them for what drives them, that to me is what kind of creates that successful relationship.
And what did you do to actually try to understand people? So did you have them go through any types of assessments? Would you try to have these deep, complex conversations? How did you crack the code on understanding people?
Yes, and I do love your code. I did it and it nailed me. So yeah, I can testify to that. But yeah, for me, absolutely. I do use some assessment techniques when I work with companies. I also ask a lot of questions. And to me, I think a lot of times we miss the opportunity in that connection with people because a lot of people talk. And I'm a big fan of listening. So to me, the biggest driver is you sit down with people, you really, obviously you do some assessments for kind of their general disposition and qualities that drive them. But to me, you also need to ask questions because everybody is different.
That's right. Okay, so you took our assessment, right? You cracked the code.
I did.
You can't come on my show if you don't crack the code, right? What was your experience of actually cracking your code? You saw these are the actual cards and you saw the digital version of it.
Yep.
What was your first impression?
Well, And, you know, it was interesting because I always believe that anything simple is genius, right? And I saw how simple it was. And then I would say the code cracked me because it was spot on. It was so spot on. It clearly uncovered all of the parts of my personality that drive me in my business, and also that kind of deter me from doing some business with some people, right? So like one of the things that I know about myself is I'm nurturing, but I also really appreciate authenticity because I don't do fake. And the code immediately showed that, which was so interesting to me because, again, it was that, like, how can something so simple can get so nuanced? And I think that's where people miss it, because people try to sell businesses so complex, but in reality, it's that simplicity that drives genius.
No, it's so good. So yeah, so B.A.N.K is the acronym, right? And your B.A.N.K code was, you remember what it is?
I remember it starts with N.
Yes. So nurturing first.
Yes. And then action second.
Action second. You can feel the heat, right? You're a mover, shaker, take no prisoners.
I believe values is third.
Yeah. Not the knowledge values.
The knowledge, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you end it with blueprint.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Which possibly is a little bit of your turn off, that you don't want to spend all your time doing blueprint things, but having really talented people on the team who can do it.
For sure. Yeah.
So this code, I call this B.A.N.K code the code of influence. And what you've been naturally doing your whole life is trying to understand people and crack their code through your way of discovery. And how helpful was that skill set? Did everybody in your company always have that skill set? Or did you have some times where there was some people friction and they weren't really getting it with each other?
I mean, there's definitely has been some friction. I would say for most part, I kind of lead with that nurturing qualities in people because I'm a big believer that you can teach a lot of technical skills, but personality is a lot harder, right? You can't really do a transplant and it takes years. So there was some friction. And I think, again, understanding, right? Understanding the quality and seeing what comes first. Like, I can see how this fixes relationships. I can see how this type of breaking the code leads people to work better on teams, because again, for me, it was sitting down with my team members trying to figure it out. Pretty much what I do with every client, right? It's sitting down with their leadership team and trying to figure out what drives them, what is their fear, like what are their fears, what's underneath all this, right? Because everybody puts such great fronts, especially in business. We're all familiar with that. But when you get into the kind of the nuances and really specifics of these values, to me, that's how you create influence, because again, people want to know that you see them, like for who they are.
Would you say that influence is an art or a science?
Ooh, it's a tough one for me because, you know, I'm a big, like I said, I'm a big psychology junkie. So I absolutely believe there is some science to that. Of course, there is, obviously it comes with an art because there is so much creativity in this and how you're going to position this type of influence. But I absolutely believe there's science behind it because, again, right, the cracking the code was such a great example of that. And I think people underestimate how much art and science comes together in business.
Yeah, I think that's great. Actually, in my book, I wrote, I said, influence is only an art if you know the science.
Yes.
Right? And,
I love that.
And that's the code that you cracked. And what I've been studying top producers for the last 20 years, right? And you'd probably agree that there's a difference between what your top producers do and people who are just magnetic and where everybody else kind of struggles. And I found that top producers crack this code and they really get good at understanding people. Yeah. And company owners try to figure out, how do you clone the 80-20 rule so that you can take your top 20% and clone it across the 80% in the organization to optimize all of them.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree more. But I also think back to what you wrote, which is brilliant, obviously, right? Those top producers, even though they're creative, right? They know how to position their influence. They know how to operate with people. I think part of what makes them so special, it's that science, right? They also know the numbers. They know what drivers, they have to implement, whether with teams or in terms of, delivering products or delivering services. And I think it's, again, right? As long, you can have the most beautiful art, And as long as you have some science back in it and some numbers and logic, that's why like I'm a big operational ninja. You know, to me, yes, I absolutely love creativity. I love, you know, like sort of non-traditional approaches to business. And I've done some really unhinged things in my success journey, like most successful people. But I also always look back at science. You know, I always go back to numbers and see what actually is working. And then you amplify that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love it. So what would you say, like, what advice would you give to be really successful in the company in terms of building those relationships with people? Do you have any hacks or things that you do to really optimize that process?
I would say get really authentic, because a lot of, and especially, and I'm going to probably call some people out, and it's with lots of love and kindness. You'd be shocked how insecure 7 and 8 figure founders and even 9-figure founders and their leadership teams can be sometimes, because everybody's kind of at that success level and everyone's trying to be impressive and everyone's carrying extraordinary pedigree at that point, right? So they all show up with almost some kind of like aura or persona. And I think, and that's again, massive credit to your code. What do you do when you come in places like this to really crack that code, to really see what's underneath them, not what's on their, you know, resume or CV or how they've shown up in business for the last 2-3 years? To me, your biggest success driver is going to be how authentically you can connect with people and how much of the code you can actually discover what really drives them, not what they just kind of front for everybody else.
Yeah, because you have to be able to see through that too. Sometimes people project, or they'll build their resume based on who they want you to think they are versus how they actually show up, right?
Yeah.
What would you say, what advice would you give our listeners and viewers on how to handle conflict? Because it's very easy to get along with someone who's your matching code, right? Yes. When you meet someone who's high nurturing and probably high action, they're probably like your new best friend. After the podcast, let's go out for lunch. Yes. You're going to create that immediate natural chemistry. But what about when they're totally opposite of you and yet you need them in the organization to be successful, but it's creating friction and conflict with other personality styles in the organization? How did you handle that as a business owner?
For me, again, I need to figure out what their drivers are, right? So if they're not mine, which is sad, but possible. And it happens all the time, actually, right? You know, not everybody is going to be your match. And so in that case, again, I try to look at the assessments. I try to sit down and learn what actually drives them, right? What gets them excited, what gets them motivated, what gets them to open up. Because if you can't get through to someone and actually really connect with them again in a genuine level, they will never work with you, for you, alongside with you. There's always going to be that friction, like you said. And to me, it's not so much about even avoiding the conflict. It's finding a path where you don't even get to that conflict level. Is how do you lead with a position? And I mean, honestly, like if we're going to be completely candid, when I come in and I work with men who are 2 to 3 times my age, I'm blonde with an accent, sometimes it doesn't help. So I have to learn, and I had to learn very much the diplomacy skills of understanding what drives someone, what is actually underneath them. If they have a personality that's completely different than me, how do I nurture that personality, right? Because it's so easy to nurture in the mirror. Like you said, I can nurture someone like me like in 5 seconds. Oh my God, we're besties. But when it's someone completely opposite, how do I nurture them? You know, I was at a retreat in India. I'm going to throw this in here. And one of my mentors there said this brilliant line. He said, the problem with people is not that they don't feel loved. They don't feel loved the way they want to be loved.
Yes. Actually, that's cool. It brings up our mantra I put on the back of the cards, make people matter, right? Because if we understand that people tick differently than us, right? Rather than being annoyed or judging them, what if we just understood them, the concept of the platinum rule, treat others the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated.
That's
right?
Yeah.
And that was a huge game changer for me. So I love that you've been applying this. You know, the most successful people figure out how to navigate and build these relationships. When the friction existed in your organization, how did you solve it? Or did you ever have to eliminate it and just say that person can't stay on the team because we can't resolve that?
I luckily in my personal organization have never had that happen. We were able to kind of resolve it and maneuver again for what works for them, because I have someone on my team who's exceptionally introverted, complete opposite on me, but also like absolute incredibly detail oriented person who like sits on every detail, knows every detail. That's not
basically very high blueprint and
yeah,
knowledge.
Yes. And, you know, researcher, kind of like quiet. But again, right, I get to all the things I'm not in favor necessarily, like not my natural strengths, right? So I had to learn. One, I had to really recognize why it's important for my organization, because I think sometimes as leaders, we tend to like, oh, do we really need this, right? But I am, again, from that curiosity perspective, always invite leaders to say, why do we need this? You know, why is this such a value to organizations? So in my case, you know, I was lucky and we were able to kind of find a pathway to work together where I laid off and give them a lot of freedom in terms of how much research and, you know, development and their own personality they're going to put in and what they're doing, because I really learned how results is what I'm really, you know, what matters to me the most. So how you get to that in your equation, I'm not really super interested in that. And especially when it's completely not the way I drive things, right? So I come from that perspective where you do what you do best. And if I can get you in your zone of genius and you perform, I will applaud you and I'll be the first cheerleader. And I do that with a lot of my clients. However, I have been in situations, and I had a situation last year actually in a company, it's a mid-sized company, where unfortunately it was too close of a connect. It was second in command and they were completely opposite. It was action versus the knowledge degree and all the, you know, researcher. And we just had to separate them. We came to the conclusion that it just couldn't be right next. Like they had to collaborate way too much to pull in different directions at all times. So we had to create like a middle level in between, and it worked. But I can absolutely see how if you are on such polar opposites, you really have to put some effort into creating the pathway for sure.
It's so powerful because for an organization to really thrive, you have to have all the different codes in different positions and optimize those codes and then be able to orchestrate and get them to all get along.
Yeah.
Can you see yourself, like this is a really quick assessment, probably shockingly so, less than 90 seconds.
Yes.
I had a guy come up to me to discredit me once. I spoke at a big conference in Singapore, 5,000 people in the audience, and he comes up to me and says, "Are you the creator of the program?" And I said, "Yeah, kind of shocking, isn't it?" And because my name didn't start with a doctor. And he said, "Do you have a degree in psychology?" And I smiled at him and I said, "No, that's why this works." Right?
I love that.
I kind of hacked it from a different perspective. Would you ever see yourself cracking the code of the stakeholders? Because you're consulting 7, 8, 9-figure company owners, C-suite executives. Yeah. Could you ever imagine sitting down with them and having a conversation and asking them to actually crack their code? Do you think they would do it? And would it be helpful for you if on the spot you were able to grab that?
Well, my clients would definitely do it, because the way I come into the companies, I tell them you have to trust the process and me, right? So I expect them we have that mutual expectation that when I bring something to the table, they believe that it's going to be valuable, right? Because I'm a big driver with how can I give you the most value up front. And for me personally, yeah, I absolutely think this is such a valuable tool, because there are so many leaders, right, who again have been in these positions maybe for a few years. Maybe they inherit a team sometimes where they're kind of learning almost like a broken telephone chain, right, where they're learning from other people who is who and how they operate. So to me, right, when you can go to the source and see this firsthand in 90 seconds, that to me is the value, right? I can show it to you quickly. It's simple. It's not rocket science. And I do think that this was such an eye-opener for me, because I'm like, the fact that it kind of was so spot on, and it was such an easy way to position it, but also so obvious, right?
This is what's so fun, Olenka. Like when people crack their code, and you get a report all about you when you do the digital version, right? Yeah. We're going to invite you guys to crack your code. I'm going to give you a gift to crack your code. But that's not why I built it. I built it because when someone cracks their code, we generate the playbook on here's their code and here's how to communicate with them, here's how to connect with them, or here's how to convert that outcome and turn it into a yes, turn it into a business deal, turn it into a relationship based on that. Do you think it would be powerful if you had like the inside playbook on exactly how that person operate, what turns them on, what turns them off, and do this, don't do this? Would that help people in their operational roles inside the company if they knew how to navigate those people relationships?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially because, like you said, that to me, honestly, it's even more of a the turn-off piece is where people usually don't spend enough time, because just from work in operations with various business owners, it's not the part that anyone wants to dig into. It's not that exciting. It's not that sexy. It's not that, it's not something that they're like, ooh, I'm thrilled. I can't wait to find out what my people hate. But in reality, a lot of times these are the underlying drivers that drive even more than what turns them on, right? Turns them on is pretty easy and quick. It's a lot, in my opinion, faster to figure out from questions, because people are more eager to be like, this is what makes me excited, right? But when people quietly shut down, when they quietly quit, when they just keep showing up in their position and just check mark the boxes, to me, that playbook is invaluable in that instance, especially because now you get to see, how do I figure out what's not working and how do I convert them, and or do I need to move them? Is this the right position for them?
Well, I love that you said that. Like if I were to deconstruct how to influence you, okay, so this is influence unlocked, right? So nurturing first for you, Olenka, like when you're connecting with people, you absolutely need them to have a real authentic connection. You, like you said at the very beginning, you don't like fake people whatsoever. And you can tell when someone's faking it, right? Okay. When they're posturing, the hair on the back of your neck will go up and you're going to have a spidey sense that says there's something about them I just don't trust, right? That's really good intuition. And the nurturing one needs that real, genuine connection. I call this your power code. Okay, so the first position of your B.A.N.K code is your power code. We're deconstructing this. Then to influence the outcome with you, action comes next. Once you have that authentic connection and you're like, hey, I really feel you, you're being genuine, you're not trying to manipulate me, then the action kicks in. You're like, let's get to work, let's make big things happen, let's close the deal, let's go out and celebrate, let's travel, let's go on vacation, we're gonna have fun tonight, right? Let's grab a glass of wine,
that's right.
Pop the cork. This is the fun part of you that comes out. And you're a boss at work, but you lead with your heart. So the impact is important. Okay, so this is the second position. We call it your passion code. And we blend those two, the power and the passion. The third part of your code, which is really interesting if we're unlocking influence, is what I call the pressure code. So tell me if this feels right. Under pressure, when you're stressed out, when there's a lot of things that are happening, do you start to dig in and research and study and analyze and try to figure out what's going right or what's going wrong and build strategy? Is that who you become?
Very, very much so. Very much so. Again, when everything fails, fall back on science.
So there you go. And that's under pressure. And what I found is that the third position of someone's B.A.N.K code is what gets activated or triggered under that pressure. It's so important. In those moments, we can't come at you from the nurturing perspective and just try to soothe you and say it's going to be okay. Because at this point, this part of your code is activated. And now it's like, look, we're not here to be friends. We got to solve a problem right now, right? And then the last part of your code, the fourth position of the code, I call it the poison code, okay? And what that means is if someone were to lean into the relationship with this positioning, they're going to probably turn you off, right? If you've got someone who meets you and they're like, all right, let's sit down. We're going to cross the I's, dot the T's. I want you to read a 20-page contract. No, thank you.
That just happened yesterday. That is so funny. I just had a pitch from a new vendor yesterday, and it was like 11 messages before they send me anything. And I was like, I'm done. I don't care. I literally am not even interested anymore, because why are we wasting all this time?
And that's exactly how this whole thing got started in the first place, was figuring out in the sales process, how do I know who my customer is in less than 90 seconds? How do I talk to them in a way to influence that win-win yes style outcome?
I love that. I love that.
And,
like I said, it cracked me. It cracked me.
Right. We cracked you like an egg.
It sure did.
All right. Well, I love having you on the show. There's so much more that we can talk about, and we will. But how do our guests find you and get a hold of you?
I appreciate it. It was so fun. It's super easy. The name of the company is iStartFirst. So it's iStartFirst.com. Or you can just look me up by my name, Olenka Cullinan. I'm primarily on LinkedIn and Instagram. And if you send me a message, it's going to be me, not a bot.
And that's important to know. Like, this is really me, not the AI version of me. So thank you for watching our episode today. I'm going to give you a gift to crack your code. So in the show notes below, make sure you get that link, crack your code. You'll be surprised at how quick it is and how insightful it is in less than 90 seconds. So just remember, crack the code, master your influence, and take it to the bank.